Really what we'll be talking about, how to take agile teams and to scale them. And this doesn't just mean, taking, let's say, 1 or 2 projects and then starting off with 50 projects altogether. We in the industry will be doing this for a while, and I've been doing this for about 10 years. I've been doing Agile for about 10 years and have tended to work with large teams in large companies and have learned a lot of tough lessons. And though you can't see too well, I do have some gray hairs to vouch for the lessons learned along the way. So anyway, we'll be talking about Agile and how to scale Agile to complex multi-project environments. I am not the expert when it comes to the technical stuff, so I will leave that to others in the room and the conference to speak on. So just to sort of level set and set some expectations over here. So here's our rough agenda for today. We'll go through an introduction of what this talk is about. I'm sort of partial to this phrase, small is beautiful. I think it really captures the essence of Agile, and I'll tell you a little bit about the history and why I chose this title for the particular talk today. I'm going to talk about 3 aspects of being small, or smallness within bigness. Small teams, small releases of small batches, and small governance. Now, governance is another 4-letter word in Agile circles. I, however, don't subscribe to that. We tend to take a pragmatic view, and I think that as projects grow and as Agile implementations mature and evolve, we need some aspect of coordination and collaboration that goes beyond just having a backlog for a single Scrum team. So that's where the governance comes in. And I think if we cede that term to others who like to do it in a command and control or big bang way, then we lose the opportunity to take governance and do it in an Agile way. So I do want to have say a few words about governance. I have a lot of stuff over here. We have a big crowd. I want to get started by asking for a show of hands, and I need to figure out where people are on the Agile learning scale. So those of you, we'll do sort of a 1, 2, 3. 1 being novice, very new, kind of brand new to Agile, if you will. 2 would be somebody who's been doing Agile for a few months, maybe a year or so. You consider yourself on top of the particular Agile technique, more than likely Scrum, and 3 being expert. So if you would please, the ones, put your hands up so that we know who are the novices. Oh, wow, great. So that will sort of orient the talk today towards you guys. Who are the 2s? Did you put your hands up again? All right. Okay, so any and the 3s, the experts in the room, you guys all sat at that table. Okay, so you'll have to help me out over here. Okay, so primarily 1s and 2s. So that gives me an idea. I'll stress some things in the presentation. This is not a pro forma. I'm not going to show up and dump all these slides on you. If you, I am making them available through the Agile Vancouver group. So if you want a copy of the presentation, it's available after we get done. However, I don't want to go through every single slide and every bullet on every slide. So I'll try to orient the talk towards the 1s and the 2s, and maybe we can get a drink together, the 3s this evening at the networking, and we can choose the 3s if you want. So the Agile sweet spot. The Agile sweet spot is historically, you take XP, the C3 system, Ron Jeffries, some of the early adopters, Scrum teams, even Crystal. We know that the Agile sweet spot was primarily around small teams, right? 7 plus or minus 2 members to a team was the guidance given by Ken Schwaber and Jeff Sutherland in those days. Ken was here earlier this morning. Not sure whether he talked about that particular parameter of a team size, but basically, in the early days, we saw that Agile did really well. It performed really well on small teams, greenfield projects. Greenfield meaning custom development projects, just starting off, not legacy systems. Co-located team members with an on-site customer or a product owner, and all the supporting and technology and environment. And what we see, this particular grid over here is from Alistair Coburn. It's from his book, Agile Software Development, the Cooperative Game, I believe it's called. He has a second edition of. And what Alistair says is that the methodology, or the size and the way you implement methodology has to change as the number of people grows or as the criticality grows. And he also has some other dimensions, productivity, traceability, and such. But if you look at this, what we find is that Agile kind of really, we know that it's sort of outperformance. It's awesome for small teams on projects that are somewhat of low criticality. But the good news is that Agile also can scale. And so the thrust of our talk today is how to take Agile, this wonderful thing that we've been doing, if I'm somewhat biased, having been immersed with Agile methods for about a decade, how do we take this cool stuff that we've been doing, take our passionate team members, and make them effective for groups of people that are larger than 50 or 100 people, or for projects that are more critical as they go up that criticality matrix. Okay. In the 1970s, there's a book called "Small is Beautiful: Economics as If People Mattered." Anybody heard of it? Anybody read this book? Okay, so we have some old timers here. So, I read this book a number of years, and I reread it recently, and it was pretty amazing that there's a chapter towards the end on management, on organizations that Schumacher talks about. Schumacher is he's a German-born British economist, and his basic premise was that for large organizations, if it was the government, he sort of talks about macroeconomics in the book, but whether it's the government, large bureaucracies, large companies, essentially his premise was that for a large organization to work, it must behave like a related group of small organizations or small teams, as it were. So I thought this is a cool principle, and I thought it really sort of lends itself well to Agile teams and Agile project management, Agile development. So the other thing that was neat is that Schumacher's approach is really about putting the emphasis on the people. And for those of you who are sort of new to Agile methods, you'll find that one of the first principles in the Agile Manifesto is what? People.
Processes.
Pardon?
People over processes.
What is it? People and interactions over processes and tools, right? So it's one of the value statements in the Agile Manifesto. So it's kind of neat that if you go back and so I don't want to strain the metaphor, but I want us to extrapolate three things from that principle, that for a large organization, where there's a huge number of people or large teams within a large organization, we have to get towards cutting things down and operating in this fashion of being small. So small teams. How many of you are doing Scrum? XP? Some XP guys. Anybody else? Crystal, FTD? So pretty much Scrum and XP. Yeah, it seems like that's the norm nowadays. And a lot of times we see it combined, Scrum with a XP hybrid, some of the Agile engineering practices, right? So this is what our team looks like. Now it might differ from the textbook explanation or the textbook definition of the three roles in Scrum. The three roles in Scrum are the Scrum Master, the product owner, and the team. Now one of the things we like to do in our projects is to make sure that we have some role definitions. And it's not enough, in my opinion, that we can just say, okay, we have a group of people and we'll just throw them together and they're the team. So yes, I think that's that's a good general definition. Ken talked about this morning about having a container of a sprint within which they can operate as such. But the other thing that we like to talk about when we put a team together are some general rules. Our team should be integrated, which means it should be multidisciplinary. Developers, testers, cutting across all those vertical silos, the traditional silos that we have. Because this is sort of an industrial age hangover. Right? This stuff, this siloed mentality, this is batch manufacturing. It comes from Frederick Taylor, it comes from the principle of scientific management, where we basically took things in batches. Like we moved things from one batch to the other, and it's not a metaphor. It's not a good model. Not just a metaphor. It's not a good model for us to adopt within software development or product development. I'll speak a little later in the talk about what's an alternate model, but one of the best things we can do is to have an integrated team. And so this is our integrated team. This is a sample team, and what we then say is that the people within this core team are dedicated to the particular project that they're working on. Now, very typically in the companies with which I work, I find that developers are working on anywhere between 2 to 5 projects. The larger the company, the more projects they work on. Is that the typical situation? How many of you are working on more than one project? How many of you are working on just one project? So you see, this is more the exception than the norm. And realistically, what we have to do is to move towards this lucky guy situation. So which company are you with? Customers, okay, get a job with this company. No, so, no, all seriousness, all joking aside, why, if they can do it, and if a lot of the industry players if the big players and the successful players in the industry can do it, this is not an excuse anymore. So we have to find a way in which we can dedicate our people at least 80%. So this is where we start to get into some of the practicalities. I say, okay, folks, you tell me you can't give me your people 100%. Give me your people at least 80% of the time, and maybe they can do some other stuff. The core team dedicated 80% of the time, or more. And then we say, okay, a DBA really doesn't have to be on the project the whole time, right? Maybe the DBA can service 4 projects, 5 projects, and architects. These are roles, the higher level roles, maybe even a project manager sometimes can be allocated or can switch between multiple projects. So for those people, we say there's an extended team. So this is an adaptation that we say that this is how we get our small teams and fit them into the organizational structure. Okay? So then the question becomes, how do we take a team that we put together, an integrated team, with some core team members working well together, they're doing some sprints, they're delivering value, everybody loves this stuff, everyone wants it, the team's drunk the Kool-Aid, management loves this stuff, we want more, right? So then we have to talk about scaling that team and scaling the adoption beyond that first team. So here's the principle. I think Ken had some guidance around this, but I want to talk about some more specifics. And there's our Schumacher, small is beautiful principle over there. You've all heard the phrase divide and conquer, right? It's the reductionist sort of approach to work. If you want to handle a complex task, let's sort of take a look at it, analyze it, divide it into its constituent parts, and conquer the work. With Agile, we put a little flip on that, and we say, let's conquer. Let's take a small piece of our work, get that one team up and running first. Let's conquer that, and then we'll talk about dividing. Right? So what we want to start with is for each person on the team to be what we call a generalizing specialist. Anybody know what this term worked? I think it was Scott Ambler coined the term, but generalizing specialist is someone who's a specialist. So if you're a developer, well, then you're a specialist developer, but you might pick up a couple of other things. If you're a project manager or scrum master, well, maybe you help out with the testing now and then, or maybe you help out with the business analysis. So you're still a specialist. No, you're not. You haven't sort of thrown away your expertise. But one of the things that you've done is to stretch outside the boundaries of your role. So it's sort of a balance between very rigid role definitions and this complete free form, everybody's the team, if you will. So the generalizing specialist adaptation we found really works well, where people have the core specialty, but they're also ready to pick up work and stretch and do whatever needs to get done do whatever it takes to get the work done at the end of the sprint. Okay. When we scale, we say, well, let's not when we've got a high performance team together. Who are the PMs in the room? Project managers. You've heard of this phrase, form.
Norm, perform.
Yeah, form, norm, and perform, right? So this is the life cycle of a team. We know a project is a temporary endeavor, so we bring people and we say they're going to go through this kind of life cycle. They're going to form, they're going to storm, and they're norm, and then they perform. And that takes how long usually?
Months.
Takes months. And when do you usually get to the performing stage?
New project.
Towards the end of the project, right? So a lot of times we find that we get some really good people together. We put them in a team. We buy them pizza. We take them out to drink. We do all this stuff, and then we get them to the performance stage, and then it's time for what? For a new project. So the project model itself is kind of suspect. So I'll talk a little bit more about a platform model. But at this point, we're saying let's not break that team up. Right? Let's not sort of break them up. We've leveraged so much. We've put in so much investment into this team. Why does it make sense? I mean, it creates so much waste to break these people up and then try to bring them up together. So we won't do that. Instead, what we'll do is we'll take a few what we call seed players. We'll take a few people from there, maybe one or two of the developers, maybe a tester, and business analyst, maybe even the scrum master. Though sometimes we might want to start off with another scrum master because we don't want to lose the momentum on that team. And what we'll do is we'll take a seed group of those people and then start another team. So we've conquered our job of getting a high performance team stood up. Now we're going to then divide after we've done that. Okay. Come on, don't have to speak at once. So we can reduce work in process, or we can increase our completion rate. Work in process is the number of in-flight projects. It's the projects that are there in the portfolio. And the easiest way to get our cycle time down is to reduce the work in process. Its completion rate is the rate at which individual teams complete their projects. It's not that easy to get a team to go, 50% faster, despite myth out in the industry. You just can't hire the smartest people in the universe. Even if you did, it would be hard to get them operating at a speed that's much faster. That's not what Agile is about. Agile is about getting people to work well, to be passionate about their work, and using these kind of principles to make sure that we're getting our work done faster. So obviously, one of the best ways to get faster throughput and faster cycle time is to reduce the work in process and increase our and as much as we can, increase our completion rate. Minimum marketable features is more about this in a book called Software by Numbers. This is basically around working with our business partners to prioritize the releases of a set of user stories in each project and into what we call minimum marketable features. And within a project, we say that we can group features together so that it makes sense to deliver them into the marketplace. Now, we're not just going, at the end of every sprint, release everything to production. What we're going to do is we're going to group those features together till they make sense as one cohesive whole to go out into production, into the commercial marketplace, and there's value to doing that. Now, one of the things that we can do when we're looking at a set of projects is use this MMF way of this principle or this practice of doing minimum marketable features and say, oh, I got a set of MMFs on project A that makes better sense to release to market faster than a set of MMFs on project B. And then so I'm going to sort of up this in priority. And not only can we now prioritize between projects, but now with using this practice, we can prioritize between sets of features, minimum marketable features, on projects, multiple projects. So it really gives a lot of flexibility and value to product owners. The other thing we want to do is to use a Kanban system, and I see David Anderson, he'll be talking about Kanban, I think, tomorrow. Are you going to talk about Kanban, David? Well, potentially. This is a lean principle where we say, let's find a way to track our Kanban simply means tracking sort of card or tracking board in this case. And what we'll do is, how many of you are using something like this on a project level? Just one? If you aren't, you should. Yeah. You can sync it up with your tool, whatever APM tool and such. But you want to make sure that you're using a tracking board where you have a backlog, initiation, the steps of your life cycle, and put your user stories in. For each on a project, these will be your user stories, and you want to make sure that your user stories are moving. You're getting fast throughput as fast as possible. Now, at a portfolio level, we'll put our list of projects up over here, and we want to make sure that we're tracking them. I'll show you a picture, and actually an example of from a client that I'm working with. This is their project portfolio tracking board, or their Kanban system for the entire project. It's basically several months out, and there are 2 teams that are using this, and they coordinate. There's an internal IT, corporate IT team, and they coordinate with 17 other teams. These 2 teams are agile. The 17 other teams are not agile, and they use this tracking board to make sure that everything's laid out, everybody understands, and they meet once a week to coordinate all the dependencies. So this is agile on steroids, if you will, at the portfolio level. They have some rules. So if it's a bright green card, it belongs to this team, and colored cards, and it's basically some simple rules around how to get this coordination going on a tracking board in a very simple fashion, and guess what, the results are pretty tremendous. Okay. All right, so we have about 15 minutes, about 10 minutes more. I want to jump into small governance. So one of the things we need to do is that as we grow our Agile adoptions, as we start moving from one team to multiple teams, or multiple sets of teams within the portfolio, we want to make sure that we have some practices in place so that everything's just not one free for all, if you will. So there are some of us in the industry who are working towards this idea of small governance. How can we put a light center, something that's supportive? We don't want a heavy PMO. We want a PMO consisting of people who are probably more than likely members of the team themselves, and who are there to support and encourage and empower the teams, not to sort of be in a sort of command and control fashion. So there are different aspects to small governance. We want to talk about individual self-management, team productivity management, portfolio alignment and management, and organizational process QA. I'm not sure we'll have time to get through all of those, but I'll cover them as soon as I can. Individual self-management. Now, you've heard of the term self-organization, right? Everybody who's doing Agile is familiar with self-organization, self-organized teams, but there's also something that's probably not talked about that much, is how we as individuals, when we're on these self-organizing teams, what do we need to do? Because each of us as a team member, whether you're a Scrum Master, project manager, developer, tester, whatever, each of us has some responsibilities to improve ourselves, to get better at what we do, to contribute to the team, and also to fulfill our own purposes within our organization, right? Peter Drucker coined a term to describe the kind of work that we do in software and product development. It's a two-word phrase. Anybody know what it is? Knowledge work. That's right. Now, Drucker actually coined this term I think way back is like in the 40s or 50s. It's been around for a while. It's moving away from the industrial model where people are seen as commodities, fungible commodities. You can put people on a team and move them back and forth. Drucker said, if you want, when you're doing knowledge work, the way you treat people in those organizations has to be very different from when you're doing industrial kind of work. So his guidelines, and there's a whole bunch of, Drucker of course died at I think a ripe old age of maybe 95 or something, but it's pretty amazing that we see antecedents, we see a lot of this stuff that has been around for a while. Lean has been around since the 1940s, right after World War II. Drucker has been talking about this stuff for a while. But basically the guidance for individual self-management that each of us has to follow is that we should concentrate on our strengths. We should not focus so much on our areas of weaknesses. We want to make sure that by the time we reach a professional age, we've already gone through a formative stage. We have some strengths and we have some weaknesses. Now, this doesn't mean that we shouldn't correct the egregious weaknesses. It just means that it's more productive. And there's a guy called Marcus Buckingham over there who's done some studies over there who talks about why it's much more productive to concentrate on our strengths. And he's got a whole book about now discover your strengths and first break all the rules and all that. The other thing Drucker says is that each of us need to overcome intellectual arrogance. So we're getting better, we're cool, this is the Agile, we're the cool dudes around the block, we're doing Agile, we're smart, we're producing at twice the rate that we used to before, we're cutting through time to market. That can very quickly lead to arrogance. And Drucker definitely says each of us, if we want to improve, need to sort of leave that aside and make sure that we're open to criticism, constructive criticism, and growth and development. And then, of course, avoid the areas of weakness. I want a word about team productivity management. A lot of times when we talk about productivity, what comes to mind when we say a team has to produce more? Usually, it's produce more is some sort of mechanical measure of quantity. Or more, right? In the old days, I'm glad we're moving away from that. But in the old days, it was, well, write more lines of code. Any developers in the room? No developers? Okay. So do you think writing more lines of like a copy and paste lines of code actually makes you a better developer? So we know, right? I mean, this is insanity, folks. I mean, we don't producing more is not doing better. So, and with Drucker himself said, knowledge workers need to be measured differently. So knowledge drives productivity. Knowledge workers themselves need to earn the metric, sort of own the metrics for what productivity means within their own space. And my key point over here is that knowledge worker productivity is dependent on quality as much as it is on quantity. So yes, we need to produce, we have to write the code, get those features done, get those user stories to completion. But the quality which we produce our work and conduct our work and manage our organizations is really what helps us in the long term. So it's as much about quality, and actually optimal quality is the path to high productivity and high quantity. So Mary Poppendake, I think she's been here to this Agile Vancouver. Mary has this practice called build integrity in. It's the concept, this is the lean concept of stop the line. Right? We don't wait to the end to inspect quality in. Instead, what we do is build quality in, and that's what we're talking about. It might slow us down in the short term, but ultimately, if we want to move fast, and lean and agile are about moving fast sustainably, if you want to move fast over this long haul sustainably, we want to make sure that we're paying very close attention to quality. So any productivity measures have to be given special thought. You guys have a Whole Foods market, Trader Joe's, Whole Foods market. Anybody knows what model they follow for their teams? It's amazing. Whole Food Market's corporate model is based around team metrics and team performance. P&L, the team itself, the team is a P&L center. And there are other, Trader Joe's is another grocery chain. I think Wegmans is one or another. But basically what each team is responsible for profit and loss. Each team gets to determine who gets hired and who gets fired. They have an incredible system where because it affects each team member individually, individually, what they'll do is they'll have a one month internship program where if we have a new hire, the team will interview them, they'll actually try them out in practice for a month, and at that point, by majority vote, the team gets to decide whether they stay as part of the team or not. And other things that Whole Foods will do is that teams will get to determine what gets stocked in each region. So what we find is that sort of a massaging and a customization of the products that are being offered within each region. So you see that there are parallels and analogs to this out in industry. Well, this is not new stuff. This is actual management principles that have been used out in the industry. We in the IT world and product development world are just catching up. So we have something that we've put together. It's called an Agile game. And then what we basically do is for Agile Scrum teams, we'll put together an equation of what is productivity, how you can get rewarded for productivity, and then we let the teams decide. There's a link over there. You can go to our website and look for more details. But I do want to skip over this because we just have a few minutes more and kind of wrap up what we need to talk about. Another concept to coordinate as part of Agile governance across multiple teams and multiple portfolios is this concept of a lean agile project management office. Now, anybody here from a PMO? PMO, are you guys popular? Yeah. So PMOs kind of get a bad rap, right? So these are the guys who are tasked with their job of going around and saying, hey, are you doing your deliverables? Are you doing your documentation? Have you done your audit? So, but in reality, there is a valuable role for a PMO. And the best way we can set up a PMO is if we understand that a PMO is not there to dictate what gets done on the teams, certainly not there to mandate what gets done on the team, but the PMO has a dual function. One is it supports and enables the team, the individual teams. And the second is it helps with all the prioritization stuff and the portfolio management stuff that we talked about in the last section. So here's the way some of our clients are putting together PMOs. What we have is the project teams themselves get to decide who gets on the PMO. So they get to elect at least one or maybe two representatives onto the PMO. That also takes care of we don't have the same people, but it could, they might move around. They might serve a tour of duty on the PMO, and then they might move to another responsibility. Management, of course, has to be given their dues, so they get to select someone. So they get to be, management gets to select someone, the teams get to elect someone, so these are the teams, the PMO. We also make sure that at the executive level, we get a couple of people, same thing, from between the steering committee and the PMO. We want to make sure that we got some executives there, so they're they're engaged with everything that's happening in the Agile team. So we have the same sort of election to the steering committee and selection from the executive steering committee down to the PMO. And then what we end up with is a group of involved, committed, and supportive stakeholders who can then support the team and help run their Agile projects. The Agile PMO itself can set up sprints, and they can have their backlogs. The backlogs are just tasks that coordination tasks, change management tasks, communication tasks. These are all things that they would put in a backlog. They can have a product owner who's usually a senior executives, and the product owner will then prioritize what needs to get done, and they can operate themselves as an Agile team. Now, this is of great value. There's version 1 is here, right? Who's Paul? Where's Paul?
Over.
Yeah, you guys did a survey. Version 1 has a State of Agile survey, and I think in the latest one, the number one cause challenge, I don't want to say cause of failure because I'm not sure it identifies it as such, but it's the number one obstacle to enhanced Agile adoption. Guess what it is? It's the resistance at the middle management level. It's basically how, it's when you start getting beyond a level, beyond a certain number of projects, you have to engage that middle management level layer. So, and this is one great way where middle management themselves gets to do Agile. They're not left out of the party. Everybody's doing this cool Agile stuff, and they get to stay in the stuffy offices. No, now, so middle management is engaged. They actually get to practice the Agile, the practices themselves. They understand everything that's going on, and they get to run these Agile. Last word about organizational process QA. Again, this is a 4-letter word, but one of the best ways we can speed our adoption, speed our that time to market, speed our project throughput, is by having a consistent set of practices, Agile practices across multiple teams. I cannot stress how important this is. So however you do it, and I just call it process QA, you want to standardize your process steps, deliverables, and tools and artifacts. One of the best ways to do it, especially because many of us are operating in environments in which we have distributed teams, is to use a tool, whether you use version 1, Rally, Mingle, what have you. You want to make sure that you have a standardized set of process steps. You agree on some audit procedures, and then you develop some standard process metrics. Okay, so pay attention to process quality assurance. Make sure that things are simple, of course adaptable. You can change them as teams need, but you want to make sure that across these multiple teams there's a standard process. Okay, do we have time for questions, or yeah, we've got about a couple of minutes. Yes, ma'am.
So earlier you talked about conquer and divide.
Conquer and divide.
So when I worked with Agile teams before, we never divided it. It was the team, we could mix those stories, and it was a team working on those stories.
Right.
So can you elaborate on what you mean by divide?
So how many projects did you have?
We would have one project that we would commit to for that sprint, some stories that contributed to a project.
And you were just that one team.
Yes.
What if we wanted to let others share that fun thing that you were doing?
That we
with
never
them?
had to do that.
Yeah, so what I'm talking was in a situation where we're looking at rolling out Agile to multiple projects and multiple teams. It's not good to do it top down. It's not good to do it big bang, just try to do it all in one step. It's the best way to do it is to do it incrementally, just like we do it Agile. And to start with one team, and like a pilot team, do that, and then scale using that conquer and divide. So if you have only one project, then there's no reason for you to divide. You would do this absolutely no reason. Okay, let's take another question this one. Any other questions? All right, oh, here we go. Yep. The extended, I think, the core team is the integrated team, but the other folks are the extended project. This is just my term. How do they participate? So let's take an example. How would a business sponsor participate in the Agile team? How often would they need to be involved? Probably, I mean, I would say at the very least, you want these people involved in the sprint review, where it's showing the product demo, at the end of 2 weeks, or showing them something, you're getting feedback. They may not need to go to the stand-up. Certainly, the product owner it's valuable to have a product owner there, even if they're a chicken and not a pig. You can decide which one you want. But basically, people who don't need to be there on the team day to day. I didn't have time for an exercise, but basically what we want to do is to make sure that at any point in time, the work is flowing. Nothing is getting stuck. So we want to make sure that if there's development, then we have the developers there. If there's testing work, then we have the testers there. So we want to make sure that each user story is flowing through the development process. So by that gauge, or by that measure, does the business sponsor need to be there? Probably not, because work can get done within the sprint without the business sponsor being there. So, but we would probably need them at the end of the sprint. Make sense? Architect. Any architects in the room? Give us an answer. How often are you involved? Are you doing Agile?
Yes.
Tell us. Horse, let's stay from the horse.
I'm dealing with a lot of projects now.
Yeah, which is typically the case. You know, they oversee.
It's a challenge. If I went to every scrum, we have 4 a day.
Yeah.
That kills a good part of what I'm supposed to be adding value doing, just staying on top. So I tend to, once a week, as much as possible.
You go to what? The stand-up, the sprint planning, all of the above?
I definitely try to get to the planning and retrospectives. That's a key heartbeat. And then I try to touch base with some of the key technical people in each team once a week, so that I can sort of stay.
Are you co-located with the team?
Some of the things what happened.
Right. So that's the other thing. You co-locate them, and even if they're not there for the meetings, yeah, they're in the kind of mix. They're in the flow. They can pick up things at least by osmosis. Okay, I think we're out of time. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed the presentation.